Hi, I'm Todd Allen from the Engineering Physics Department. I'd like to talk to you about career opportunities in the National Laboratory System. I'm going to use the three handouts that hopefully you've been provided to explain what is a Department of Defense or Department of Energy Research Laboratory, what are their missions, and then I want to use an organizational chart from Oak Ridge National Laboratory to give you an idea of the breadth of opportunities in the research world in a national laboratory. So let's start with the first handout, which should be labeled Department of Defense Research Laboratories. Each branch of the Department of Defense, the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force, each have their own research laboratories. The figure that I provided you is for the Air Force, and it shows that the Air Force runs a number of laboratories across the country. The Army and the Navy have similar dispersed facilities. Using the Air Force as an example, you'll see that each one of the laboratories tends to have a specific function. So for instance, the Rome, New York laboratory tends to specialize in information technology and sensor technology. Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico tends to specialize in space vehicles and directed energy. Now, while each of them has a specialization, within each laboratory they will have a broad range of scientific abilities, from people that do very basic, fundamental research to people that do applied research. Now, obviously, in a Department of Defense laboratory, that applied research will be towards weapons technology or weapons delivery technology or platform defense, for instance, things that are of interest to a military organization. We'll talk about the Department of Energy laboratories in a second. While they also have broad ranges of interest, they'll tend to focus their efforts on energy-type missions. So let's shift to the second figure, which is the Department of Energy National Laboratories. You'll see, similar to the Department of Defense laboratories, where I used the Air Force as an example, the Department of Energy laboratories are spread across the country. Each one of these laboratories originally was started around World War II and had a specific function. Many of them are related to weapons development. So for instance, Pacific Northwest National Laboratory in Richland, Washington was originally built as a site to produce plutonium for the nuclear weapons programs. Sandia and Los Alamos National Laboratories in New Mexico were the national laboratories that developed the weapons and the weapons delivery systems for the nuclear weapons program. Oak Ridge National Laboratory in Oak Ridge, Tennessee was originally put together to do uranium enrichment for the weapons programs. Not all the laboratories started as weapons facilities. Argonne, for instance, started out as a civilian nuclear reactor technology development laboratory, and Brookhaven National Laboratory in New York started out as a large synchrotron or accelerator facility. But over the years, past 50 years since the first laboratories were developed, the majority of these laboratories have evolved into very broad laboratories that serve multiple functions. So similar to the Department of Defense laboratories, these specific Department of Energy laboratories will have scientists that are doing very basic, fundamental research to people that are doing very applied projects. The other thing that's different about the national laboratories is they tend to be places where you can do large engineering development projects or run large facilities that are typically beyond the size that could be handled at a normal university. So a couple of examples. At Argonne National Laboratory, they're the host to the Advanced Photon Source. This is the United States' largest and most advanced synchrotron light source. It's about a mile in diameter, I guess. Down at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, they're the home of the Spallation Neutron Source, which is the United States' brand new and most advanced neutron scattering facility. So you'll have very specialized facilities like these at the national laboratories that play host to researchers from around the country. In addition, you'll notice from the symbols on the Department of Energy figure that the different laboratories are run by different parts of the Department of Energy, and that helps define their focus. You'll notice that Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, Argonne National Laboratory, and Oak Ridge National Laboratory are all run by the Office of Science. So their main boss, the Office of Science, is primarily interested in basic fundamental research. Other places like the Idaho National Laboratory, you'll see, are run by the Office of Nuclear Energy, and the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Golden, Colorado is run by the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. So their specific focuses would be nuclear energy in Idaho, renewable energy in Golden, Colorado. But in each case, all of these laboratories have evolved into being very multi-function. To get an idea of what goes on at a specific national laboratory, let's use the organizational chart from Oak Ridge, which is your third handout. You'll see in the organizational chart, in the top row of boxes below the laboratory director's box, the laboratory is broken down into major scientific components. So for instance, biological and environmental sciences, computing and computational sciences, energy and engineering sciences, and so forth. Within each one of these boxes, you'll have scientists that specialize in that specific area. But you'll also notice that the national laboratories are large enough that they're essentially run like large businesses or corporate entities. And this is seen in the boxes along the bottom row of the organizational chart, where you'll see they have a chief financial officer function, communication and external relations functions, environmental safety and health quality, so safety of worker functions, legal, human resources, everything you'd see in a very large organization. As I mentioned before, within the scientific components, that's the second row of boxes, you have scientists that are working on basic science projects all the way up to very large, involved, complex engineering functions. And in a lot of cases, the Department of Energy relies on teams from across the laboratory systems to work on major projects. As an example, with the advanced photon source or the spallation neutron source, which I mentioned earlier, the design teams that put those together typically had teams of workers from different laboratories bringing different areas of specialization to bring the whole project together, and just coordinated by a management office at the specific laboratory where that large major engineering function was. So you'll see within the national laboratory structure, you have the opportunity to do everything from basic research up to working on large engineering systems. Now, for someone who's finished a research degree at a university going to work at a national laboratory, there's quite a few options. For instance, you might start out as a researcher on a project, similar to what you might have done as a graduate student. But there are opportunities to move up through the management ranks also. So for instance, you might start out as a researcher and after a number of years move up to become something like a section or a department head where you're in charge of a small team of researchers, not doing as much hands-on research yourself at this point, but guiding the research and helping develop the funding base for the people that work for you. Then as you move up the organizational chart, you can obviously get to people like the laboratory director, who no longer does any hands-on research, who's essentially the chief operating officer or the chief executive officer for the laboratory, in charge of everything, not only the scientific components, but all the business components also. Within the national laboratory structure, it's not just PhD researchers. You will have people there with master's degrees, bachelor's degrees, or no degrees in different functions, whether they're helping with the environmental safety, health quality aspects, essentially the worker safety and following things like OSHA rules, or lawyers or scientists. Anything you could think of in a large organization that would be committed to science, you'll find in a national laboratory structure. So while you can do things similar to what you may be used to seeing at the university, sort of small-scale hands-on research, there are really a wide variety of things that you can work at in a national laboratory. Some of the national laboratories also work on things like national security projects. So for instance, typical of a laboratory following the breakdown of the Soviet Union, we had numbers of laboratory scientific staff going into former Soviet Union countries to help ensure that their nuclear facilities were put into a safe condition. And we were using our expertise to help out other parts of the world. And so in those cases, you're less of a scientist and more of an advisor to another country. So hopefully this short discussion of the national laboratory systems has shown you what you can do in the national laboratory facilities. It's very broad: research, management, senior management type positions, working on national level problems. Thanks.